Steal like an artist, they say, but steal correctly. And you're not really stealing, I'm really just saying steal so you click the video. If you click the video, it worked. But don't worry, you're in the right place because hopefully you're gonna learn a lot. How to improve your artwork while using references. Giving your art that extra edge. Pushing for more flair, pushing for more of a cinematic vibe. Knowing fully well that the continued pursuit of heat and sauciness in your art will breathe greatness. I'm Manga here, the creator of Apple Black, and for this tutorial we'll be using the 24th chapter cover of my series Apple Black inside Apple Black Volume 4. Do not miss this volume. It is heat.
Alright, how do I improve?
Well, here's how you do it, nerds. The first thing I did was to come up with a plan. Now initially, based off of the scene, the story, just the overall vibe of the chapter, I got an idea of what I wanted the vibe of the chapter cover to look like. I knew I wanted it to be Sano, I wanted it to be something where he looked kind of gloom. Almost like he was kind of just floating, or half dead, or just fainted, or just in a trance of some kind. Almost like he was drowning, and maybe there was a question mark as to what exactly was happening in the image, which I think encapsulated the whole vibe of the chapter. So coming into it, even if you're drawing influence and taking inspiration and using reference, a lot of it should be born from your ideas. That way you actually know what to go look for, what to research, what to get influence and inspiration from. There's always going to be little droplets, or sometimes big droplets, of originality or uniqueness from you. From the idea giving birth to the overall idea of the visuals, and down to the actual doing. So I had an idea of the sketch, the camera angle I wanted to come at it from, and even within the original sketch, I still had to go back in and tweak it to make sure the anatomy is a little bit more correct, like the facial structure was what I want it to be. You can see me make those changes before I then ink on a separate layer, and then go full ham on the magic. Probably subconsciously drawing from influence I already have from memory to put this together, the camera angle, the facial expression to have for Sano. A lot of things are coming into play for me to give birth to, I guess, my own originality. So on my own, I'm coming up with a unique image, a unique pose to use. Then I do research, because now I have this little baby I want to develop. I want to see what others have done. I want to see where I could draw power from, or get inspiration from to give birth to something completely new, which is the goal. So you do research, and I try to find things that are already similar, maybe even realistic, to not have anything to do with anime. You might also search for anime, but in this case I wanted like some actual cinematic photographs of real people and models, and try to get that whole vibe and lighting and all of that. So making sure to look at multiple similar images at once, learning from them, understanding how water would look in this type of image, trying to find images that I thought were similar vibes, because sometimes people think alike, and funny enough, there were a lot of images that were similar to what I already had in mind. Now, was that maybe because I've seen similar images like it before, or they've seen what I've seen? It doesn't matter. Bottom line is, I was able to find things that were similar, and I was just kind of learning from each, finding things that I liked and finding things that I didn't, figuring out ways I could add to it that would be completely me and would fit my art style, that would fit the story, that would fit the environment that I wanted to create. I know exactly where Sano is, so what would the translation be for that place versus what I'm actually looking at in the image? And I'm making sure to study more than one. Again, I'm looking at the water. What kind of water? Sometimes it's really, really calm. The water might actually look very still, and sometimes that works. Some of it, maybe because of the lighting or the time of day, it's very reflective. So this whole time I'm trying to figure out what I want, what works best for me, and how I would find that translation for my art style. Not just the reflection and the light sources that'll be hitting it, but also underwater. How would that look? Sometimes because of the lighting, you wouldn't even be able to see underwater. Maybe you would just see a straight up mirror type reflection. How does that reflection look? Is it wobbly, as you would imagine for water? Or is it just straight up mirror-like, depending on how calm the water is? For the more cinematic images, is there some kind of bounce light, rim light? Like, what's going on? And these are all the things I'm looking to take from to really bring my own image to life. Taking notes and studying, while looking for little pockets where I could add my own pizzazz. You know what I'm saying? What are common things you find in all of them? Like, some of them have some blurs, right, to really add focus to the subject of the image. And so that's In some cases, that's like really standard stuff when putting together an image or taking photos. And now I'm going to bring that into my artwork. So I'm learning in this way. So I'm not just getting reference from the image. I'm not drawing the exact same thing. I'm not tracing. It's more of like studying to see what works and see how you can pull that into your stuff. And subconsciously, again, especially when I'm looking for the stylistic translations for my art style, since the art style I want to go with, I want it to still be my manga anime style, but have that little dash of hyperrealism that you might even find in works like Yusuke Murata and what he does. Except here we're doing it digitally. I wanted to push my digital work more than I have in the past. I didn't want it to be completely simple cell shading. There'll be elements of that, but I wanted a tad pushed to be a little bit more realistic with the water and how it interacts with the character, but still have that anime touch to it. I already know that there's going to be parts where the water is touching the skin, and maybe I'll use a white outline for that part to show that it's water versus the black outline for the character. It's just little things like that where I'm critically thinking and trying to come up with solutions to figure out what's the best way to make this work for the best possible results. Now adding in the hair, drawing from logic, but also drawing from these images. I'm looking at how wet the hair is. There's some images where you can't see underneath, or at least it's very difficult to, or you see more where maybe there is a shadow cast from the subject. Then you can see underneath those paths a little bit more. So I'm also looking at reference, understanding the characteristics of water with light and all that fun stuff. But for the basic stuff of how the hair interacts, it's wet because of water, duh. So it's going to be a little bit more in tune with the skin and sticking to the skin, and then flowy underwater. A subtle line there just to let me know where he's popping out of the water. That will come in handy when coloring. I'm adding in the flats. This just helps my brain think of this whole thing, makes it a little easier for me. Some of this are just things I already know. Even when I'm using these references, I'm not like completely taking from them. I'm still using the knowledge I already have from just creating a lot of art, logical stuff, swimming myself, what I've seen, and pulling that into this image. On a separate layer, putting some color, maybe reducing the opacity, just to, again, let me know really well where the water stops and where the skin begins, just to draw separation. And the colors I choose are also based off of the environment, the color of the sky, time of day, all of that is coming into play. When coloring the water, I'm drawing from how I would normally color water, but also going back and forth with the references and all the references, almost looking at them at once. Playing with the digital software. It doesn't matter which one you're using, Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint, but I'm playing with layers and just trying to make it work. And usually this would lead to you even forming your own new ways of doing things versus always learning from other artists, because other artists, when they develop some of their styles, this is kind of how it happens. Sometimes there's a lot of trial and error until something unique is formed. Playing in with the gradients, because I'm looking at all the references, it's usually darker at the bottom and then lighter at the top. And definitely darker the deeper you look into the actual water itself. Normal things, adding gradient for maybe some lighting from the environment, some kind of atmospheric pressure of some sort. Self-shading that we've always gone over on a separate layer, lenient burn, reduce the opacity, and just pick a color, a dark version of that hue that's in tune with the mood and overall vibe of the atmosphere. Separate layer for more lighting on the water, going back and forth with the reference. And you can see me now, maybe on a separate layer, trying to add a reflection, bounce lights, the colors I choose. Again, that's me picking a translation for what's actually happening in this world, in my world that I've created, in that actual space versus what's happening in the reference. Then I do some things where I have separate layers underneath. Maybe I duplicate it, but the one underneath, I'm playing with the filters in Clip Studio Paint to give it that wobbly water effect while it's underwater. But again, I don't want anything too crazy. I want it to be a tad subtle. It'll be shakier, the shakier the actual water is. But again, we're also drawing from reference. So that way I can see how intense the reflection is with the references and try to find a perfect sweet spot for what I want to do. How much reflection do you see? How much of the body underneath the water do you see? And then at this point, I started to just have fun and do things that I would normally do. I'm not even looking at reference anymore. I'm just kind of doing my thing. This is where some of the fun comes into play. I'm trying to visualize what a light source would look like when the light source is underwater, and that's the light from his arm. Those who know the series kind of know he has pretty much this super godlike arm. So I'm playing around with how that would look, some like particles on the water, drawing from memory as well. So you're mixing everything up. You're not just drawing from one reference spot. throwing in some harsher lights. Maybe there's another light source, and then another one on the left, which has the whole rim bounce lights that's kind of pinkish there. If it's too harsh, I pull it back a bit. And then I start to play with more like filters and adjustment layers, then Photoshop this time. And here I'm drawing from things that I've learned from other artists, you know, the little things that you do after an image is finished. And maybe I'll have a separate video where I go over this process and how I did it for literally every chapter cover in volume 4. And with all the chapter covers, I tried to push myself to do something unique, do something that I don't normally do, so that they stand out more, have it be more cinematic, for instance, and then just try other techniques that I've just not done as much while still maintaining my usual art style. So you guys should definitely watch out for that video. I do things where I duplicate the layer and have a blur on one of them, then use a mask to keep the subject sharp while the edges blurred, kind of like the images we saw in the references. I did the same process for that anime look, which I've done before, where you duplicate everything, you merge all the layers, put it above, blur it out, change the blending mode to lighten, and then reduce the opacity. And then the higher the opacity, the more it looks like flashback memory scene in anime. But I'm just blending all those things and all the techniques I know. Chromatic aberration as well. When it comes to the filters and adjustment layer stuff, I'll save that for another video. But the whole point at this point is to show that I'm experimenting. It's doing the more anime style thing of, like, say, drops of water on his body, and doing that with white lines where water hits his body, doing that with white lines as well, and just having fun overall. Now, these are the references that we used and had in mind, and this is the final result, still born from an original thought and tied to what's actually happening in the series. Using reference, pushing your work, giving it that extra edge. And this is what I did. Hopefully you guys learned from it. And then you guys can also share your thoughts and how successful you think the image came out to be. Please do all the fun engagement stuff unless we have beef. Like it, subscribe, follow me on social media. Check out Apple Black. The more you guys buy the volumes of Apple Black, volume 1 to 4, the higher the chances of us getting an anime. Trust me, we're already in talks with networks. Let's make it happen. Check out more videos. There's a lot of gems all over the place. So what manga? And I'm Audi 9000.